Hello, my name is S.K. Williams, and it is the Feast of All Saints, the day when we commemorate all the saints in heaven, honor their lives on earth and their holy examples, and recognize that they have made it to the beatific vision and are now with God in heaven. It is a day of somber reflection, but also a day of great joy, and a day of aspiration to which we hope one day to join those great saints. It is also a day to turn to God through prayer and to recognize our own need for such things. For indeed we do need such things as saints to intervene on our behalf. We need the prayers of even our fellows. And above all, we need God. And we look forward to going to God who sent us, standing before His awesome immanence, and knowing that we are secured for eternity. We have sins, of course, sins that stain us scarlet, sins that stain our souls a deep black. But we also have the light of Christ, who, no matter how deep the scarlet stain, can render it white as new. And for anyone remaining with the ridiculous woke nonsense, white and red and black here are used to talk about cloth and dyeing them and stains and cleaning them. It's not racial. Just to throw that in because it is 2025. It has been a rather interesting year, 2025. And a year where we've seen the quiet revival in Britain and people turning back to God and people realizing they need God and realizing that the secular progressivism doesn't really have the answers that we seek. It was a predictable shift, though, because things like this have happened before. We delude ourselves into thinking every single time that secularism rises that this is the first time such a mass movement began, and the first time in history that such ideas were promoted, and finally religion has been defeated and reason shall prevail. And of course, the secularists never promote real reason, they promote their own form of religion. They just pretend it's not. Just as they pretend that religion is not rational, which is not always so. Of course, the secularist religion is not rational, but the Christian religion is. So are most others. And cutting ourselves off from God has always led to a decline in culture and a diminishment of life, and has never led us to a happiness. And we live in a culture that cut itself off from God and slowly began to die. For we separated ourselves from the taproot that gave us life and found that we could find no new source of life. We give into our own hedonism and our own despair and our own delusions, which is ironic because God is called a delusion by those who insist they're not making any claims and have no burden of proof, but are definitely telling us that God does not exist. And yet here God remains. That ineffable force holding us all together, that grand mind of the universe, binding us to eternity. For only God is truly eternal. And we need God. And the worship of God is not because God is some arrogant tyrant or petty dictator demanding our love and worship under the threat of eternal torture in hell. Rather, God demands worship because He is due worship as our Creator, and ultimately we, His creation, not only owe Him this out of respect or even out of obligation and duty, but because God is more than just something that made us out of matter and let us go, Without God, we could not exist at all. For we are truly part of God. We and everything around us exists only in the mind of God. And it is God that holds us true and together. And it is this binding of us, this need for God that we have, that ultimately prompts our worship of God. God does not need our worship, and even if no one worshipped God, God would endure, God would continue. God would not miss our worship. God desires it, of course, but not to stoke his ego, but because it is placing everything in its proper place and giving everything its proper due. And it is by violating these laws of fundamental existence that we truly become delusional, and we truly cease to be able to think and reason. For sin does darken the mind, and the more we turn from God, the more we sin, and the more we sin, the less we understand the world, and yet the more we proclaim ourselves wise and rational when we are not. And that is the message of All Saints' Day today that I would give. A reminder that man is not as wise as he thinks, yet also not as intelligent as he thinks, and not as powerful as he thinks, and knows far less than he thinks, and denies too much that he knows to be true, convincing himself of falsehood, even when he knows it is false. Man, with his malleable mind, so given to his passions, and so corrupted by his sins, will lead himself to his own destruction. And there is a reason why those who turn to God have always done better in life, have had happier lives, more contented lives, have been lives that are not given to despair as oft, and why civilizations built upon God, especially those of the Christian nations, have been the most successful, and why those nations, once they turn to self-hatred of their past and self-hatred of their former Christian beliefs and turn to secularism, begin to collapse. Oh, certainly, early on in the secularism, they could say, look at all of our achievements, look at our technology. But they are laying claim to a heritage that is Christian, that they deny is Christian, and claim is secular and modern, but has nothing to do with Christianity. Or worse, claim it is an ancient Greek and Roman humanism that they invented because they've deluded themselves into thinking that secular humanism is an ancient Greek and Roman contraption, but it isn't. And this is the issue. Oh, what sorrow comes, oh, what night renewed. The truth of the matter is, without God, we have no life. And without life, what is there but dead matter? Here in the year 2025, the year of the snake, my own patron year, I ask us that we turn to God. I ask that we strive to become saints in heaven and join the saintly choir. For what is our alternative but death and the grave? We celebrated death and the grave the day before on Halloween. Coming to terms with our mortality, coming to terms with that which makes us afraid, and perhaps that too is appropriate. For we go out of that veil of darkness and shadows where monsters lurk in the night, and which corruption and evil seek our souls, onto the bright shining light of All Saints. Perhaps it is best we celebrate the spooky and the haunted on Halloween Day, so that the day after we can celebrate the light. The light of the saints beckoning us to heaven, beckoning us to a holy life on earth that will be better, infinitely better than any life on earth we could have without God, and calling us to a life thereafter which is even greater still. For this life we live on earth is a reflection of where we will spend the rest of time after our deaths. It is our testing ground and the place of choosing. Those who choose to turn from God will find misery in this life, even if they pretend happiness. And the more they deny God, the more they will be denying reality. And the more they deny reality, the more they will succumb to sins of the flesh and hedonism and desires that will blind their judgment. And then they will die and continue to reject God, refusing that light to shine upon them. But those of us who choose the light, even though we imperfectly walk in it, even though we shrink back to the darkness and turn our eyes, averting it from the sight of God at times, if we turn our face back to the light and return to it, even if we stumble into darkness occasionally, we can find our way to the land where it is always light and where the source of all light comes. We can find in God grace and holy unity, and that is the ultimate and highest cause: union with God. To be united with the true will of God and return to Him. That is what our souls truly desire. And even those who walk away from God desire it. They just don't want to desire it. They shun themselves at their very center, their core. No wonder they walk away in delusion. And yet here we are. Those few then that seeking God and give their all to Him, and those masses that deny God, giving to their own pleasures and yet finding no pleasure, for their pleasure turns to ash. Walking this pilgrim road on this transitory world, longing and waiting for that great day, that day of terror, that day when we die, that day when we all die. And we all do die. We are all mortal. And awaiting that final destination. Some believe that salvation can come even after death. Some believe that salvation will eventually come to all. Perhaps so. It is not for me here to say. But I will say this. Even if eventually salvation is for all, why put ourselves away from God for a needlessly long time while we suffer? Why suffer in this life when we could find peace and happiness by accepting God and His Word and how He created us? Acceptance of what we are is one thing that we struggle with as humans. This is why such things as transgenderism exists. People cannot accept what they are. It isn't just that they imagine being something else, to understand it, or perhaps just as a flight of fancy, they actually wish to live as something else, claiming they are that thing. As if by sheer force of will they can change reality, they can bend nature to their desires. And they can't. But they are not the only ones who do so. People given to womanizing will never be satisfied with a woman until they renounce their womanizing. People who drink to excess will never be satisfied with how much to drink, returning to the bottle unless they renounce it. Those who are given to theft for gain never have enough. Those who steal for thrills never have enough either. And there is not enough blood in the earth for those intent on ending life. Of course, there are those who end life for other selfish reasons. But let us not delude ourselves further. The world offers us nothing but death. The world tells us that Christianity is a death cult that worships a dead guy on a stick, and that they will give you life through science and reason. But what they give you is secular humanism, which has given the world communism before, and which will only give us something like communism in the future, as much as they say communism was actually a form of religion that had nothing to do with atheism and nothing to do with humanism. It had everything to do with atheism and everything to do with humanism, and everything to do with why people truly become atheists: the selfishness, the greed, the desire to pull down the wealthy and powerful, rather than to build oneself up. For it is always easier to pull others down. And this idea that we can build with our own hands a utopia on earth and perfect humanity, when humanity and its corruptions cannot be cured through talk or enculturation. And it certainly cannot be cured by turning from God, who gave us life. And every time secularism emerges, secularism produces tyranny. That is all secularism ever produces. And this is because secularism is a religion, but not just a religion that is exactly like the religions it condemns: cruel, callous, and demanding absolute obedience and exclusivity. Those who walk the path of Christ, or even those who walk other paths, and I am not equivocating them, but only pointing this out, have better lives because they understand the truth better and tolerance better. Of course, there are those who admix Christianity or other faiths with their own desires, and they always end up with a weak, crippled version of what their religion is and what it teaches. And then people point to them and say, see, it did not work for them, but it would have, had they embraced it truly and fully, and not tried to only half embrace it, whilst embracing their own desires or embracing secular assumptions. It never works that way. We must give our all to God and pursue truth with all of our passions and dignities, or simply counterfeit truth and claim we are pursuing it when we already decided what is true, whether or not it matches the reality. And for such, there are no saints, only sinners, in their own damnation that they refuse to see or admit, while those who are not like them strive evermore for that beatific vision, and to become saints in heaven, and to live with God. I haven't much else to say, so I shall take my leave of you now. Thank you, God bless, and goodbye.